Olga, it's a pleasure to host you here in the Meta Ventures show, and then just go straight to the point. We met on LinkedIn,
Yes.
and on comments about the metaverse and the possibilities that could bring for students, for professionals. What's your take on it? I mean, we're talking before about seriousness. How do you see this new world that not necessarily should be a brave new world, but it is a new world?
Well, this is the world that I imagined when the pandemic started and I had to go online as a teacher. And, I was faced with students basically shutting off their video cameras, and lecturing to as I mentioned, to dark screens. And I totally get it. And of course, also the law protects students' privacy. So there are reasons why the cameras are turned off, and I can't insist that they turn them on. But the issue for me is not that I'm shy, that, I have a problem. I can talk endlessly, and I have notes that I prepare in advance. So, it's not a problem for me of being short of what to say. But I am worried about the fact that for students, the experience is impoverished because they're passive. They're not engaging with fellow students. They're not engaging with me. They're not asking questions. So I know that, they're not learning as well as they could be learning, because part of obviously learning is being excited about something and being part of a conversation, being able to debate. I was able to get some of that going in yesterday's class. I showed my students images of violence in hockey. Men's hockey, and images obviously of men hockey players behaving very badly, and I asked my students to theorize, think about the causes, and I mentioned that I introduced theoretical frameworks. What are the causes? Is it the commercialism of sport? Is it the fact that some individuals are just personally more belligerent, more have violent tendencies? So anyway, that I got my students to actually engage with me, but it doesn't happen all the time, and I regret that as a teacher, who puts invests so much in teaching and actually improving my students, because I'm not doing this just for money. I actually enjoy developing young people. I'm a mother. I have 3 kids. I was very much involved in my children's education. We talked about having young kids. I did it for 20 years, it was 20 years flew by. I mean, literally, I was educating my children, and now I educate other people's children, and I really care about the results. So I am concerned about how online education is taking place right now. And as I mentioned, as soon as I started teaching online, I imagined a kind of a virtual classroom, where students could have this kind of avatar of themselves and feel like they're sharing a space with other students. And I thought, well, how wonderful. They don't have to turn on their camera, but you can actually see them reacting, moving, engaging with fellow students. It would still give them privacy, but it would also encourage them and allow them to enjoy a game, that, that sense of being in a class with other people.
And this is something that I 100% agree. And one of the things that I'm excited about, and there's a lot of unserious things about the metaverse. People, I don't even like the name much. I think it's about the evolution of the internet, but this aspect of expanded reality, of virtual reality, of having this notion of presence, of like a true hybrid, it is digital, but when you are there, you kind of feel a presence, maybe a way of engaging. But at the same time, going back to your initial point, how come that we are in the 21st century and we have the internet, we have access, but at the same time, everybody is open about their things. So if you go to social networks, everybody's super open about it. But then when it comes to education and it comes to work, 2 things that occupy a lot of our time as adults, why is that so poor now? We are recording this in 2022, but is it a mindset? Is it because I can't blame the technology. I think people are very distracted. What is it, Olga? How do you see that? I mean, thinking about potential ways of addressing this.
Well, I mentioned to you when I wrote that I'm a student of Schumpeter's, Joseph Schumpeter's, and I love this notion, very central, I think, to understanding change in society, which is creative destruction. In order to have evolution, real change, you have to destroy many of the things that already exist. Yeah. And we're, as a society, always very loath to let go of the things that we are, have invested in building and learning. This is why a lot of instructors have quit, especially older instructors. They cannot start learning everything that's involved in online teaching, because then you have to create, presentations to go with your lectures. You have to figure out Zoom, how to combine. But I mean, we are going to move in that direction, whether we want to or not. Our children are not going to find it difficult to move on and adopt virtual, the metaverse.
This transition, but it's so much. This transition is taking, because let's take, for example, edX or Coursera. A lot of people they just don't finish their courses, and it's all there. I mean, I can go to any university, almost virtually any university in the world for free, but it's still, if you look at the numbers, people just don't finish. And I would say, I'm not going to blame the professors or the students, but for one hand, it's not just putting the PowerPoint online and just let it go. But on the other hand, how serious are you to actually learn something that is already digested for you? And as you say, I think there is an adaptation. No, it's like we were talking before, and I think it's great to speak to everybody who's listening here, who's watching us today. This idea of curation, because even the very notion of a professor is the ultimate curator, the master that curates the knowledge.
100%. I mean, definitely have that role, because there is so much to choose from, and it's a tremendous amount of work to curate that information, to extract key points, right? And to somehow connect those very important dots into something that, in many cases doesn't exist until you make it.
Yes.
Yes. I told you about the love course that I created. It doesn't exist. It hasn't existed. I created a narrative, and as I was doing it, it was very stressful, because sometimes I didn't know exactly where I was heading and, how to bridge things. I knew where I needed to go, but I didn't know exactly what was necessary in order to get there. So there's a lot involved.
But in that beautiful, this discovery process, in the process of creating it, no?
It's fantastic once you've done it.
But how much you learn, in this process, no?
Of course, but everything is done. I mean, we function with time constraints, right? I mean, and other kinds of constraints. The fact that, for instance, colleges don't pay us to do a lot of this work is a constraint, right? Because we can't, we can only invest so much time when we're not actually, when there's no return. And I hate to speak of this, but
no, absolutely,
it's our reality, right?
It is.
And most professors put in a lot more than they're paid to do. So that's also a reality. But in, to get back to your curation and point about curation, and also the idea of adapting to new, to totally new platforms, new ways of doing things, it's always a painful process. And that's why Schumpeter called it creative destruction. And a lot of industries, of course, don't survive this process, right? They fall away. So I don't know what's going to happen to education and the educational industry. I think it's going to change.
Are we in the end of an era? Do you think we are? I mean, is it because somehow the educational process, because the way we have now, it's kind of almost for a millennium, if you really think about it. No?
Well, it's going to change. I don't think that the old way of doing things is going to disappear right away. And one of the reasons for this is the fact that in-person teaching still makes a lot of sense for a lot of students.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that personal connection, being in front of your students, giving them the opportunity to ask you questions when they're there. That's very important for a lot of students, but it's not important for everybody. And it's also not possible for people who are, you know, in a different time zone, right? So I think what we're going to see are two parallel ways of delivering education. I think this is what's going to happen. You're going to have the old-fashioned system, and you're going to have a very different new system.
And I think this new system will be a blend of digital and then the physical, because I think we're not going to drop the physical completely, but why not the physical? I always dream about this platonic, Socratic, educational process. Just go under the tree, and that is a physical aspect. Then you ask questions, but that's physical walk. That is a very interesting.
It's very important. I actually just had images that I showed to my students about what is the definition of a dialectical method, right? And of course, you know, if you Google dialectical method, you'll see a reference to Socrates almost invariably, you know, because it's all about conversation, and conversation is by nature a back and forth. Yes. And that's also a learning process, right? You have to be able to ask questions. Very few people can internalize that question making process. Some people do. And if you look at a lot of applied philosophy, it's still very dialectical, but you don't actually have a, you know, interlocutor, right? You don't have person B and C asking questions. It's there. They're there. They're just not named, right? A lot of applied philosophy is a process of arriving at and defining definitions of something. You know, I was just love. What is it, right? It's a very complicated question to answer. And we just went through a chapter in Raja Halwani's book on love, and it's very interesting how his defining of love is to divide it into two different categories, short-term and then the longer-term relationships, right? But it's still arriving at definitions, and it's still a dialectical process, because you look at some definitions, you discard them, or you say, well, that's not enough, right? There has to be something.
Definitions more like ways to find the truth, no, in the experience, in what it is, no, because I feel that a lot of people ask a lot of questions, but they're not sincerely looking for the truth. And if you just, you mentioned love, if there is a question, what is love? But not just from a definition purely conceptually, but what is? And then we're going to use the definition, use the conversation just to find the truth. That could take.
And it's even harder when there are a couple of different truths. There is the platonic love concept, you know, and there is, you know, love is crazy, wild experience, you know, being blown away, sublime, right? A sublime experience. There are different definitions. I walk my students through these different paradigms about love. Can you imagine?
Fantastic. But do you find, how do you see, I mean, just for us, just kind of a close, and maybe we can have other conversations, but do you see seriousness in your students? How? Because they are 150% connected online everywhere. But when you find, do you find seriousness in them, in some of them, in all of them, most of them? How do you recognize that? How do they engage with you, or how do you engage with them when you see that spark? Because I think that's going to be critical in this thing.
Well, you know, my pleasure, I make my pleasure known when people consistently when some students, I mean, to answer your question, some are serious and some are really interested in improving, in self-improvement. Okay. And they've actually, especially mature students, and I have to say, among them are lots of women, mature women, frequently with children. They've arrived at a point in their lives where they, you know, they want to be educated and they really appreciate what you give them. Okay. They recognize, they're mature enough to recognize that you're teaching them, and they're mature enough also to be grateful and appreciate it. So that's, yes. So that's, you know, that's the answer, general answer to your question about, are some students serious? Yes, some are not. Some are very young. Some just have to earn their credit, you know, and I can always tell because they have to submit written work. So I know what they've digested. I know what kind of effort they're making, you know, not just when they speak to me or when they don't speak to me, but also when they submit written work to me. But so, yes, I mean, I think that for those who want to learn, they're going to make an effort, whatever tools or instruments you give them. For those who are hanging back and are a little bit more lackadaisical, I think if you give them a game, the right tools, they will become more engaged. So, you know, I'm less concerned with people who are going to make an effort no matter what. I'm more concerned with people who need a helping hand, especially among students, right? And that's why I think, you know, that the new tech is,
could
you
be,
know,
could be just a way to engage, but and bring them to your side of the table.
Bring them into the classroom, or at least something that feels like a classroom.
Right.
Okay. And of course, you're going to be able to do this with students from all over the world. And that's why I'm saying that education is going to be very different, or at least a part of this, you know, what we do as educators is going to be very different. You're still going to have the old system. I believe you can still go to the college or university classroom and teach once the pandemic is over. In particular, you'll be able to do it in person. But you know, at the same time, you're going to have, and I see this, I see my college doing this. It's offering courses online because obviously there is a market for it, right? So anyway, that's the
oh, but it's fantastic because I think there is, and when I have conversations with serious people like you, I feel the same. The answer always comes to this aspect of the people that are serious. They somehow recognize that life is short, so there is no time to really. But it's not a. It is actual. It's an actual realization. So I need to make the most of it, not just from a performance point of view, but what can I do? While I'm here in this configuration somehow. And for the younger generations, I'm totally bullish in this sense too, that some people, the serious ones, they will find through this means of the metaverse or new technologies, they're going to find their connection again, maybe to access this space of discovery and truth that makes life so interesting.
Look, I foresee that this is going to become a completely natural way of being with people online, and the younger generation is not even going to question it. They're going to take it entirely for granted.
And this aspect of bringing people from everywhere, that you can have colleagues from everywhere teaching with you the course to people from everywhere in the same virtual room. This is it's truly a fantastic experience. It could be. There are some risks for sure, but I think the benefits outweigh the risks.
Well, you know, the risks are no more than the kind of risks that exist in actual classrooms.
Absolutely.
You know, there are risks there as well. So.
Fantastic. On that note, let's stay here for this one. I would love to have you to discuss other points in the future. So let's stay in this episode. Olga, thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
I hope you
It was
can
a pleasure.
host it next time.
Nice meeting you. Wonderful conversation. Thank you.